This is the case of Victoria Anna Elizabeth Cafasso, a young woman whose life was tragically cut short under mysterious circumstances. A story filled with unanswered questions, shocking twists, and a community left searching for closure. In this video, we'll look at the events leading up to her disappearance, and an inquiry that has left more questions than answers. Before we begin, please subscribe to the channel and like this video. Your support helps keep these stories alive and ensures the victims are never forgotten. Now let's begin. The story takes place in the remote and beautiful island of Tasmania, Australia. Victoria was born on June 8, 1975, in Surrey, England, and spent much of her childhood growing up in Italy. Though born in the United Kingdom, she maintained strong ties to both Britain and Italy. Those who knew Victoria described her as intelligent, curious, and eager to experience life beyond familiar boundaries. Her sharp intellect was often attributed to her father, a lawyer who hoped she might one day follow a similar path. Her mother owned a travel business, a background that likely shaped Victoria's deep love for exploration. Travel was a defining part of Victoria's life. She frequently journeyed with her mother and was raised in a comfortable, well-off household. Close to her family and supported in her ambitions, she appeared to have a promising future ahead. Fluent in Italian, English, and French, she was widely regarded as bright and capable. When she told her father that she aspired to become a doctor, he was filled with pride. As she grew older, Victoria enrolled in a law program in Italy, though her desire to see more of the world only intensified. Around the age of 20, she told her family one evening that she planned to travel to England to stay with her grandparents. Her father was unhappy with the decision, but he ultimately could not stop her. Victoria left for England soon after. While in England, she began planning a trip to Australia. A cousin named Venus lived in Tasmania, an island state about 240 kilometers south of the Australian mainland. During this period, Victoria contacted another cousin, Simon Howard, seeking support. She told him she wanted to visit Australia and asked if she could stay with him during her trip. Although they were cousins, they barely knew one another and had only met twice before. Despite this, Simon agreed to host her in Tasmania. With those plans in place, Victoria prepared for the journey, packed her belongings, and traveled to Australia, arriving on October 6, 1995. After the long trip, Simon and one of his friends met her at the airport. Together, they drove to Beaumaris, where Simon was living at the time. Beaumaris was a small coastal community with only a few hundred residents, made up largely of fishers, surfers, and retirees. The house where Victoria stayed was a modest rental, located within this quiet and isolated area. On the drive to David's house, they stopped at Shirley's Lookout, a viewpoint overlooking Beaumaris Beach. It was there that Victoria met 3 local residents, one of whom was a woman named Hilda Jackson. Hilda later recalled that they connected instantly. From the very beginning, Victoria made her feel at ease and came across as a warm and gentle young woman. Hilda described her as exceptionally kind, soft-spoken, intelligent, and strikingly beautiful. Many people also noted a strong physical resemblance between Victoria and Hilda. At the time, this detail seemed insignificant, but it would later take on a far more unsettling meaning. Beyond this brief connection, Victoria didn't have time to build relationships with many people in Tasmania. Within days of her arrival, she would become the victim of one of the state's most disturbing and perplexing murder cases. She arrived on October 6th, and within a week, she would be gone. On October 9th, Victoria visited Hilda Jackson at her home. The two bonded quickly, spending around half an hour together before Victoria left. They talked about seeing each other again soon. Later that day, Victoria attended a small, private birthday gathering for a woman named Mandy. It was during this visit that she learned the house Simon was staying in actually belonged to Mandy. That evening, Victoria went for a walk around the neighborhood before returning home. The next day, she took another walk, continuing to familiarize herself with the area. Then came October 11th. Victoria woke early that morning at 8:10 a.m. She told Simon she planned to walk down to the beach and asked to borrow his small carry bag. They ate breakfast together and spoke briefly before she left the house at around 9 a.m., reaching the beach close to 10 a.m. Later, witnesses reported seeing Victoria sunbathing approximately 700 meters south of the beach access gate near the Surfside Hotel. Another person who saw Victoria that day was Hilda Jackson, who noticed her walking alone toward the beach. Hilda planned to meet her later, intending to go for a run along the shoreline after finishing work, hoping they would cross paths. At this point, Victoria was last seen alive. Roughly an hour later, Hilda set out for her run, but she chose to start in the opposite direction from where Victoria had been sunbathing. She decided to run against the wind first, making the return trip easier. Hilda later said she thinks about that decision every day, believing that if she had gone the other way, she might have encountered Victoria, possibly prevented what was about to happen. At around 1:30 p.m. that afternoon, a local woman named Margaret was walking her dog along a familiar stretch of beach near Freshwater Creek. Margaret lived nearby and followed this same route almost every day. As she moved along the shoreline, enjoying the quiet and the sea air, something unusual caught her eye near the water's edge. As she drew closer, the scene became horrifyingly clear. A young woman was lying face down in the sand, partially unclothed. While the waves gently pushed her body back and forth, she was completely motionless. The sight was deeply disturbing. Shock and fear set in as Margaret realized what she was seeing. After a brief moment of disbelief, she turned and ran to the nearest house to get help. She reached the home of two men who lived nearby and urgently knocked on their door. Sensing the seriousness of the situation, the men accompanied her back to the beach to confirm what she had seen, ensuring there was no mistake in the small coastal community. Once they saw the body for themselves, police were immediately contacted, triggering an investigation that would soon shock the nation. The victim was quickly identified as Victoria. Her family, including Simon, was notified of the devastating news. From the outset, it was clear that this was not an accident. Victoria had been murdered. Soon after, a large number of police officers and forensic specialists arrived at the scene. As investigators examined the area, several of Victoria's personal belongings were found scattered nearby, including a bracelet, sunglasses, a shoulder bag, sandals, a ring, and a watch. Her body was located at the water's edge and she was partially unclothed, with her possessions spread across the scene. The post-mortem revealed the sheer brutality of the attack. Victoria had been stabbed 17 times, with 2 of those wounds proving fatal. Additional stab wounds were found on her head, face, arms, and hands, indicating clear defensive injuries. Detectives concluded that she had fought fiercely and desperately against her attacker. During the assault, 3 of her teeth were broken, suggesting she had been struck with a heavy object. Her face was also severely damaged, with the front partially caved in, showing the extreme violence used against her. The attack was prolonged and vicious. Investigators also discovered signs of a struggle approximately 55 meters from where Victoria's body was eventually found. Her bikini bottoms, towel, and t-shirt were missing from the scene and have never been recovered. After this point, the investigation became riddled with serious errors. The crime scene was covered in footprints left in the sand, and investigators believed at least one of them may have belonged to the killer. Despite this, police took only a single cast of one footprint, even though clearer and better preserved prints were visible nearby. The cast that was taken was of poor quality. Later, forensic experts determined that the footprint cast was insufficient for comparison. It lacked the level of detail needed to definitively match it to a suspect's footwear. A properly preserved print could have revealed critical information, such as the type of shoes worn, the individual's walking pattern, and even an approximate shoe size. This evidence could have been used to compare against suspects or witnesses known to have been on the beach that day. Instead, the footprint evidence proved useless, and no additional prints were collected. Further mistakes followed almost immediately. Victoria's body was moved and covered with a blue top to shield it from public view. before a thorough crime scene examination was conducted. This action introduced foreign material into the scene, contaminating and compromising potential evidence. The area was also not secured quickly, allowing local residents to unknowingly walk through parts of the scene and disturb what little evidence remained. Critical photographs and video documentation were never taken, and the state forensic pathologist did not attend the scene, causing delays in the collection and analysis of vital forensic evidence. The investigation and evidence handling were so poorly managed, the police effectively undermined their own chances of identifying the killer. This raised an unavoidable question: who was responsible? Who killed Victoria? Because the murder occurred in broad daylight and shocked the small coastal community, speculation quickly spread. One theory suggested the involvement of the Italian mafia, based on the fact that Victoria's father was a lawyer in Italy who had taken legal action against organized crime figures. However, no evidence ever supported this claim. Another theory focused on a local offender, particularly due to a prior disappearance in the same region. 2 years earlier, on March 12, 1993, a 26-year-old German tourist named Nancy Grunwald vanished while cycling along Tasmania's east coast. Nancy had arrived in Tasmania from New Zealand on March 6th and rented a bicycle on March 9th to explore the island. On the morning of March 12th, Nancy left the St. Helens hostel with plans to travel south along the Tasman Highway. Around 11 a.m., she was seen for the last confirmed time. After that, she disappeared without a trace. To this day, the case remains unresolved, and some continue to speculate that Nancy's disappearance may be connected to Victoria's murder. Following Victoria's death, police quickly questioned Simon and other acquaintances she had met during her brief stay in Tasmania. Each was eventually cleared of suspicion for legitimate reasons. Despite this, fear and tension spread throughout the neighborhood, with residents anxious that they might be wrongly accused or even living near the perpetrator. Victoria's family traveled from Italy to Tasmania and visited the beach where their daughter had been found. Her body was eventually returned to Italy for burial. Not long afterward, they received a poignant letter written by Victoria herself just days before her death. In it, she described how much she was enjoying her time in Australia, a bittersweet reminder of the life taken too soon. The investigation proved incredibly complex. Over 300 people were named as potential suspects. Astonishingly, despite the murder occurring in broad daylight on a relatively busy beach, no one directly witnessed or heard the attack. Police even briefly considered Martin Bryant, who later committed the Port Arthur massacre, as a potential suspect, but he was ultimately ruled out. Authorities and the media eventually narrowed their focus to 4 men who became known as the fishermen: the biker, the doctor, and the surfer, believing one of them could be responsible. Victoria is thought to have been attacked around 11:30 a.m. that morning. The surfer, whose identity has never been confirmed, drew attention after witnesses reported seeing a young man on the beach at roughly the time of the murder. Police suspect he may have been in his 20s, around 6 feet tall, physically fit, and exhibiting the typical appearance of a surfer. Witnesses saw him running along the beach around 11 a.m., and a light-colored Subaru station wagon was spotted nearby, possibly connected to him. After the murder, the suspect reportedly left the area, never to be identified or apprehended. Despite widespread media coverage, neither the man nor the vehicle has ever been traced. The fisherman, identified as Tony Kirkland, was considered a suspect due to suspicious behavior noted in the weeks leading up to Victoria's death. Hilda Jackson had a particularly disturbing encounter on the beach near the dunes. She recalled a man approaching her slowly and asking in a chilling manner for 4 directions off the beach, leaving her deeply unsettled. Shortly afterward, Hilda noticed that her hidden underwear had been taken from the sand while she ran. Later, she discovered that a neighbor's clothesline had been broken into, with several women's garments stolen. Police eventually linked these incidents to Tony Kirkland, a fisherman from a nearby town. Investigators were unsure whether Tony intended to target Hilda specifically or had mistaken Victoria for her. given the striking resemblance between the two women confirmed by witnesses. The identities of the biker and doctor also remained part of the investigation, but the surfer and fisherman stood out as the most likely persons of interest in the eyes of investigators. Despite extensive efforts, no arrests were made, and the case remains unsolved, leaving a haunting mystery over the quiet Tasmanian coast. In 1998, just a few years after Victoria's murder, a 17-year-old girl obtained a protection order against Tony Kirkland, the fisherman, claiming he had been following her and making violent threats. Kirkland's involvement during the investigation remained unusual. A judge later noted that he seemed to enjoy the attention of being a suspect, finding it thrilling. Ultimately, he denied any connection to Victoria's death, and authorities do not believe he was the killer. Another person of interest was Gary Holmes, known locally as the biker. Although he was not affiliated with a criminal biker gang, he rode a motorcycle, earning him the nickname. Police scrutinized his behavior after Victoria's death because witnesses reported him acting strangely on the day her body was discovered. During questioning, some noted a zombie-like demeanor, which raised suspicions of shock or possibly guilt. Holmes also had visible injuries on the day of the crime, including cuts and bruises, which he attributed to punching a door after an altercation with his ex-wife. Despite the odd circumstances, investigators largely ruled him out as a suspect. The final primary person of interest was the doctor, Roman Hassel, a Czech physician living locally at the time. He had only recently moved to Tasmania a few weeks prior to the murder and had a troubling past, including recent jail time for threatening his second wife with a knife and a documented fascination with weapons. Early in the investigation, police noted that Hassel could not provide a solid alibi for the morning of October 11th, though someone claimed he had been sick at home, an assertion that could not be verified. He also had cuts on his face during that period. Initially, Hassel told authorities he had never visited the beach that day. Later, one of his girlfriends reported that he admitted to being there, directly contradicting his earlier statements. One of his ex-wives recalled asking him if he had killed Victoria, to which he allegedly responded, "Maybe I did. I don't remember." Despite these concerning details, no concrete evidence has ever linked him to the crime. His medical career ended in disgrace, and he was deregistered after multiple instances of malpractice. Tasmanian police have stated that he remains a person of interest, along with other individuals, and they are open to receiving any new information. After these leads, the case went cold. Victoria's father passed away not long after her death, and they were buried side by side, the deeply tragic moment for the family. Over the years, police have occasionally reviewed the case, even employing new technology to search for overlooked clues. However, no one has ever been convicted, and the murder remains unsolved. The crime profoundly affected the local community. Hilda Jackson recalled a time when neighbors left their doors unlocked, and trust was abundant. But Victoria's murder introduced a lasting atmosphere of fear and suspicion. Many residents moved away, and some even ended their marriages, unwilling to live in a town where the killer could still be among them. A well-known investigator who later examined the case concluded that even if the killer were identified today, a successful prosecution would be unlikely. Critical evidence was lost or compromised during the early stages, leaving too many reasonable doubts. According to the expert, the only realistic way the killer might ever be caught is through a confession, which seems highly improbable. Victoria's case remains a tragic story, casting a long, somber shadow over Tasmania. Her family continues to live with the grief and uncertainty left by that horrific day, adding to the chilling nature of the crime. The teeth Victoria lost during the attack were never recovered, a haunting reminder that someone may have kept them as a twisted memento, and that the killer's identity may remain forever unknown. Thanks for watching, guys. Please subscribe to the channel, and don't forget to click the bell icon on all. There are many more shocking stories ahead.